Death comes to us all. But what happens if he was to offer you a job? Would you accept? Hello and welcome to the Friday Fantasy Show from the Bottled Imp, exploring the realms of fantasy. My name is Ken Boyter, and today we're going to be taking a look at another Terry Pratchett Discworld novel. Yes, this is Mort. This is book 4 in the Discworld series. I believe there's 41 of these bad boys, and we are going to be reading and reviewing all of them, even if it takes me for the rest of my life. Yes, this was published nearly 30 years ago, 1987. So it's really interesting. I do remember reading this when I was a mere slip of a lad way back in the day. And I really enjoyed it, so there's a bit of a heads up there. So I was curious, obviously I'm going back now and reading all of the Terry Pratchett novels because I never read all of them. I read, I think, the first 5 or 6. And I was curious to know what it was like. Are they dated? Are the jokes not funny anymore? You know, sometimes things can get outdated. So I was curious to see whether or not these novels do stand up compared to modern day novels. So let's find out. So just what is the setup of Mort? Well, it's pretty straightforward. There is a boy. He is about, I don't think he's actually specified what his age is, but he's about 15 or 16 because his father wants him to go and get a job. And his name is Mort. And obviously, you know, that has other connotations, doesn't it? So the father wants him to go and get a job. He takes him to a job fair, and hopefully he will become an apprentice to some such business because he's not suited for the family farming business, his father declares. Well, lo and behold, nothing is simple in the Discworld world. Yes, because death turns up. Oh yes, and death does offer him an apprenticeship. Now, his father believes that death is actually an undertaker and accepts. So off Mort goes into the realm of death. And that is pretty much the setup. So it is very straightforward, but things get more and more complicated, as you can imagine. There are a few themes that run through this novel, and it's becoming more apparent that Terry Pratchett kind of explores the themes in more depth than the first 3 novels. Well, certainly the first 2 novels, The Colour of Magic and The Light Fantastic. In Equal Rites, that main theme is all about equality between the sexes, so that is a big central theme. So as the novels, I'm finding, as he's writing them, the themes become more and more central rather than the jokes, because initially in book 1 and book 2, the jokes seemed to be what he was after, and then the plot just seemed to rattle around after it. So the themes for Mort, obviously it's going to be death, isn't it? If you've got death as one of the main characters. And this is the first novel to focus on death as a main character. Death did crop up in previous novels, but, you know, just as a kind of side character that only appears for a brief moment. And we get to see Death's domain. We get to see where he lives in the world, in his realm. And we get to see what his domestic life is like. And it is quite funny because Death has been personified. Death is human-like, yet without having feelings or understanding of what it's like to be a human. So Death can talk, and Death has an adopted daughter, Yazabel, and also a manservant, or death servant, I guess you'd call it. And his name is Albert. He's an elderly helper, servant, who is there solely to look after Death and help Death. So, as I said, we have Death as a person, which obviously creates all sorts of fun and games because Death can go anywhere in Earth, but he's sort of responsible for people not dying because that's fate's job, but he's there to collect their souls. So he's got this kind of weird relationship with humans where he obviously drops in on people's lives, well, just right at the death actually, but yeah, he doesn't really fully understand the customs, any laws, any understanding. He hasn't got feelings, so he doesn't understand how humans operate and how they work. So that's a nice interplay there that Terry Pratchett explores. And Death in this book has become more and more curious about the customs and what it is, and emotions, what it is to be a human. So he decides that he's going to take a little holiday, hence why he needs an apprentice. Mort, because he's going to then train Mort up to sort of fill in when he's on holiday. So that's exactly what happens. Mort decides that, obviously he's going to be an apprentice, he's going to follow the job, and he gets the training, while Death goes on a bit of a holiday. So Death goes and explores one of I think it's the biggest city in the Discworld, which is Ankh-Morpork. And Death goes and indulges in human activities. He wants new experiences like getting drunk, dancing, gambling, and yes, finding a job. So obviously you've got a lot of humour that's involved in that scenario. And while he's away, yes, as I said, he wants Mort to sort of start doing his job. So he asks Mort to go and collect the soul of a king. Just, let's just say it doesn't really go to plan, as you can imagine. Because, Mort doesn't behave like Death. Obviously, Mort is human, so he starts getting emotionally involved with the person that he's actually gone to take the soul of. It's their time. They've actually decided, fate has decided that this person needs to die. All Death's job normally is just to go and collect the soul, but no, Mort gets emotionally involved and doesn't do it, causing all sorts of consequences. An alternate reality is formed. Which leads us on to the theme of mortality. There is a princess, Princess Kelly, and she's the one that's meant to die. But, as I say, Mort refuses to accept that and doesn't, and actually changes history, changes what's meant to actually happen. And she then stays alive. But there's an alternate reality that crops up, where she's been given a second chance, and she really, but she knows what's happened. Eventually it clicks that, she should have died, but she hasn't died. And what happens is, because she's in this sort of netherworld, she can't be seen. People find she's there on the human plane, but people can't actually see her. They kind of think they can see her. There's like a shimmering, and they think they can hear her, but they can't really. So she gets more and more frustrated, because she's walking around. She's actually a princess, so she's used to giving orders and being the centre of attention, and yet nobody's paying her attention. So that's a very clever twist on what happens, if kind of Death. Well, I guess ultimately he's responsible. If, Death isn't taken, if the soul doesn't go and leave the body when it's meant to, what actually happens? So that's I like that story, that yes, it's not just, she goes off up into Death's realm and survives there, and no, there's consequences for the other characters on the human realm as well. So again, it's playing with that whole concept of mortality, and which is part of Death, isn't it? There's also the theme of romance and love. Yes, there is a love story that Terry Pratchett plays upon the trope of boy rescues girl, boy falls in love with girl, girl falls in love with boy. It's not quite as straightforward with that, but he does explore the theme of romance. And I think, if I can remember, this is the sort of first time that romance has really been explored. And it feels a little bit tentative. It's almost like, should I put a romance story in here? Yeah, go on then, why not? Because it's not fully explored. It's not the central theme. Definitely, he wants a romance to be bubbling along in the background, and that's what it does. So if that's what he set out to achieve, then he has achieved it. But I felt that maybe it could have used it a bit more, because it sort of seems to start off quite well and then just disappears from the plot, and then eventually right at the end there is a nice twist at the end. It's not all just sugary and sweet and everything works out fine, which is good, but you just gotta think, oh yeah, of course there was that plot strand as well. But on the whole, I reckon those three themes work well together. Certainly the death and mortality themes work brilliantly together, and then you've got a romance that kind of sneaks in there that you probably could have done without. So overall, I really did enjoy it again. Yeah, bits of it started to come back to me. Certainly the bits with Death, because it's he's such an interesting character. He's sort of, you don't feel sorry for Death, but you sympathise with Death, because you kind of think, actually, Terry Pratchett does a very good job of kind of putting you in Death's shoes. He's like going around killing these souls, but he has no idea of kind of what that means for a human. And I guess at the moment, we don't know what it's like to cross over die, I mean, is there a realm? Is there another realm that we go to? Does our soul go to somewhere else? Or is that it? Once we're dead, there's nothing there. So we don't know. So it's quite nice to have just a little peek. Obviously it's fiction, or is it? No, obviously it's fiction. So it's nice to have a little peek into that realm and, you know, do it in a humorous way. The plot is very strong, just like Equal Rites. It's very, very strong. And as I say, the first 2 books seem to be the jokes were the main thing that Terry Pratchett wanted to get across. And it was interesting, because when I was doing a little bit of research on this book, I did see a quote from Terry Pratchett that says, I'm just going to read it here, "Plot has existed to support the jokes." And that's when he was talking about the Colour of Magic and the Light Fantastic books 1 and 2. And he kind of put Equal Rites in that, but I would say Equal Rites, the 3rd book, the plot does exist on its own, and the jokes are then there when he finds them. And that's the same with Mort. The plot is very solid. There's a lot going on, and it makes sense. You don't ever feel like, oh, that wouldn't happen. I know it's difficult because it's all fantasy anyway. But you know, even within fantasy, you have to, if you set up a world, you still have to stick to the rules. You have to create those rules to make it believable. And Terry Pratchett does that nicely. So the plot really works well. It keeps you engaged. It certainly was a page turn. And also I cared for the characters. And I think that's the thing with the first 2 books. Yeah, Rincewind is a good character. He's a good, you know, he's a great wizard. He's a cowardly wizard that likes running away, and he's not very good at magic. So that's a nice twist. But I didn't necessarily care for Rincewind because I didn't really know him. I didn't connect to him, and so therefore I didn't care for him. Whereas with this book and Equal Rites, I care for the characters. I want them to succeed. I want them, you know, I want to go on their journey. I want to find out what they're doing and what they're thinking, what they're feeling, and especially with Death. And so Death does reoccur. You know, he was a popular character, and so he does reoccur again as the main character. So as I say, all the characters have the motivations. They're better. They're more rounded. You know, this isn't great literature. Okay, so obviously this isn't going to win any Nobel prizes for literature, but you can really start to see that Terry Pratchett is really getting into his stride. He's learning more and more about you know, his characters and what he wants to do with them and what he wants to get across as well, and the fantasy elements that he wants to explore. In the first 2 books, he chucked everything in. It was really a lot going on. It was zigging about everywhere. So there was a lot of plot, but it didn't really make a lot of sense. Whereas there's a lot of plot, but it does make sense. It actually follows a way that the reader can follow it. So I also like the fact that there's a little aside where Death goes off on holiday, and so obviously that doesn't have to be there. You don't have to see it, but you learn more about Death and how Death then experiences what it's like to be human. And of course, when you have a character that isn't human looking at something to be human, you're actually learning about being human yourself, and you're trying to reflect, you know, oh, is that what it's like to be human? So again, that's a nice little touch from Terry Pratchett. Now, it was voted in 2003 by the BBC. They had a big survey, big read contest. It was voted the 65th best loved book in the UK. So there you go. So there's a lot of affection for Terry Pratchett when all these books came out. So would I recommend it? Yes. It's a standalone novel, so you can dip in if you just want to start anywhere in the series. Book 4 in the Discworld series of 41. Yes, Mort. Thoroughly recommend it. It's packed full of jokes as well, but they don't crowd the plot. They don't, you know, they're not just there. You know, they're not the main thing. So again, I would recommend it. But we're going to be cracking on to the next one, which is Sorcery, or Saucery, because it's spelt slightly differently. But there's a reason for that. Anyway, thanks for watching. We have got loads of other book reviews, fancy book reviews on our YouTube channel, and we've also got film reviews, we've got board game reviews, we've got lots of other content as well, so check that out. Plus, we've got a Twitter account. You can follow us on there, and also we've got an Instagram account, and we've got a Facebook account as well. So follow us and share the word of the imp. And remember to keep it unreal, especially if you work for death.